The essay's been gamed for a long time. People have hired essay coaches. They've gotten a lot of coaching on the essay. And now with AI, I think there's a lot of skepticism in admissions offices about who is writing these things. I'm going to make a bold prediction that the essay is going to be out the door. I don't know what will replace it, but I really do think the essay is either going to be really diminished or eliminated altogether.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Cara.
Vanessa, we have a second-time guest today, Jeff Selingo.
He'll get a velvet jacket, like
only
on SNL.
Five-time guest.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, yeah. That's how we roll. Jeff, you're welcome back 3 more times. Jeff is a fabulous guest because he is really on the leading edge of a topic that so many people have front of mind, college admissions. And he keeps coming out with more and more content to help us wade through all the confusion around what the heck is happening in terms of not just college admissions and how messy this process feels, but how early it seems to begin.
Right. I mean, so Jeff's written about colleges and universities for over 2 decades. And his new book is the New York Times bestseller, Dream School, Finding the College That's Right for You. The conversation with Jeff is broader than that. So the book is super helpful in thinking through your family's values and cost and finance and all of that stuff. But our conversation is more about the bigger college admissions process, what's going on with the law, what's going on in admissions, what's going on in high schools and in families. It's really kind of a big picture examination. And Jeff is so knowledgeable and so insightful. And he's really looking to help change how this works in our country and how we think about it. So it's very, very thought-provoking.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, if you are feeling overwhelmed by either the process or the prospect of the process, not only will you feel a little less overwhelmed after listening to Jeff, but you'll actually probably feel like there's something you can do about it.
So buckle up. Here we go. Hey, Jeff, welcome back.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back. I guess I did okay the first time around, right?
You got like a B plus. Yeah. You were pretty good.
Is that grade inflation?
That's
we have in high school,
I know, that's like an insider, like college talk joke. Jeff, I actually only brought you back because I have a senior applying to college and I'm going to use the next 45 minutes for personal guidance.
Nice.
You are my captive audience. No, I'm just kidding. You're back because this is a big, hot, complicated, messy topic. College is no simple experience for the kids, journey for the parents. It's political, it's emotional, it's majorly financial. And that's why you're here, to help make sense of it.
And let's face it, this whole admissions process feels like it's getting increasingly more random. It doesn't feel understandable anymore. And you have really distilled it down to its most understandable components, knowing that anything we say in this moment will probably be outdated the minute we are done recording this episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. But second, it is true. I mean, admissions basically didn't change forever, and then it changes all the time now.
So let's start with that. Thank you for that perfect segue. There's many, many ways admissions have changed and higher education has changed. But can you talk about 3 ways the college admissions process has changed just in the last sort of 5 years?
Yeah. So the first thing is that post-COVID, or actually during COVID, all these schools went test optional, which meant that in 2020, 2021, 22, all these students were applying to colleges that normally they wouldn't have applied to because they didn't have to submit a test score. What ended up happening then was that there was this inflation in applications because we didn't really know who was really serious, whether these students were even getting accepted. But the following class, looking at the stats from the previous class, said, oh, I might not get in, acceptance rates are going down, so I have to apply to more colleges. Well, when students apply to 10, 12, 14 colleges, whatever the number is, they could only go to 1. So then colleges and universities started to practice what was called yield management. So they started to figure out, well, if these students are not serious, we're not going to accept them. We're going to defer them. We're going to put them on the wait list, or we're going to outright reject them because we don't think they're serious, because we want to make sure that our yield, meaning the percentage of students who actually show up, who enroll, is high. Because otherwise, if it's too low, colleges have to just admit more students. They look less selective. And if they look less selective, they become less popular the following year. So all of these things were interconnected: test optional, rise in applications, and yield management by the colleges and universities, which created this like weird game for students. And the thing about admissions is that you always look to the past year for advice, like what happened last year. And I think what was really interesting to the parents I interviewed, if you had like a kid who graduated in like 2018 and 2019, and then another kid who graduated in like 21, and then another kid who graduated in 23, you had like very different processes for all three of those kids, even if they were the same kid, essentially.
I'll just say there was a rumor going around when one of my kids applied, and I can't remember which of my kids. So as you walked through those 2-year differences, my kids experienced that when they were applying to college. But there was a rumor going around that there was one school, and we're going to get into big state schools in this conversation. There was one school where they were inundated with so many applications that they couldn't figure out how to even begin to read these applications. And so the rumor was that they took the boxes of applications that they had, because, they had printed them all and put them into file folders in this rumor. And they put them at the top of a set of stairs. Have you heard this rumor?
No,
and
I have not.
Kicked the boxes down the stairs, and the ones that landed at a certain spot were the ones that they would open and read the applications. Like, this is how people tried to make sense of this massive volume and randomness in a process that used to feel random already, right? It used to feel complex already, but we were.
It's a great rumor. That would have made it for a great TikTok video. I wish we saw that.
Right?
Yeah,
Jeff, you got to make it.
I think we're going to do that.
Ego.
Of course, the reason I know that rumor is not true is because they don't print out the application.
Right.
So otherwise, that sounds great.
That part of it.
Otherwise, it sounds great, though.
I know. How do they even know about file boxes? They've never even seen them.
Printers.
Or printers.
So let's. I want to talk for a second related to how things have changed on Cara's rumor mill, which is the rise of the Southern, Midwestern, big state schools. The head of the upper school where my kids go to school, he calls it the college game dayification of the college process. Like, how did that happen? And why are kids like so enchanted with this image of what college is like?
So it's interesting. So I trace this in the book. I have a whole chapter on what is essentially referred to as the great student swap, because you're essentially trading students from one state to another. Even if students might go to their own in-state public, they're now getting crowded out by students from other states. And so they have to go across the border. We actually, for the real origin of this, we have to go back almost 20 years to the early 2000s, when big public universities, their budgets were getting cut after the 2001 recession. And then again, of course, after the 2008 recession, they needed money. The best way to get money was to get students from out of state or out of country, so international students as well, who would pay twice the in-state rate. So that's number one. They needed to get that money. And it was a perfect time because this huge millennial generation was going through college. And there were all these students applying to college, and the privates at that time did not increase the size of their class, especially the most selective privates. So the next best choice for many of these students were the big public flagship universities. Then fast forward to COVID, and all these students who were in high school starting to think about college, or even in middle school, working from home in their bedrooms during COVID, started to see all this social media, particularly from big Southern flagships, which were open that first fall after COVID, the fall of 2020. And they were like, wow, that looks like a lot of fun. Football, Greek life, just people enjoying themselves. And by the way, the sunny weather helps out a lot. And these were places that were also expanding. And for the most part, they were cheaper than even northern publics, whether you were in the Midwest or the Northeast. And some of them, like Alabama, were offering a ton of merit aid, a ton of discount money to families from the North who had good stats and likely would have gone private. So this has been a slow rise of these publics in terms of out-of-state students, but then it really accelerated in the last 5 or 6 years.
And the power of the imagery is really incredible. You do talk a lot about it. I have found that especially the Alabama story, where, it's not just on kids' TikTok feeds. There are documentaries about it. There's,
Bama Rush.
I'm fascinated by it, right? It's like, this is an incredibly interesting story, writing the narrative of what college is supposed to be like. And Jeff, there were places where COVID restrictions meant that you went to school in masks and you were sort of with kids. Where I live in LA, you were looking at 15, 16 months in your bedroom doing school. These schools became, it was like, a salivation reflex when you would see these images and you saw kids hanging out, living their best life. And it was happening right now in the here and now while you were zooming into school for month 16 of your lockdown.
And there's no doubt about it, a place like so I went to Alabama to report for this book, and then an excerpt from that chapter was in the New Yorker, and the opening piece in the New Yorker talks about how I walk into their admissions center, the Welcome Center, where prospective students come, and they put so much money into this building. It's basically brand new, but you walk in and your name is in lights, and you walk through kind of a museum-like exhibit about the university and things like that. But then you walk into this room, which is, I put it up on my Instagram and would love to share it with your viewers and listeners as well, because you walk into this immersive room where you have these video monitors that essentially roll over you, so roll tide, and you're immersed in this atmosphere of video and music. And what it is an Alabama football game on a Saturday. So even if you're not there on a Saturday in the fall for a live game, I'm telling you, just sitting in this evokes these images of what it would be like. It puts you in the moment. And I think it's like the place, it's the room that sells you on the fun of that university.
Yeah. I've had people say to me, the Alabama tour is the best tour I've been on. And they, toured all over, God knows, 20 different schools. Okay. So we've got this sort of sophisticated marketing. We've got the impact of COVID and the desire for sort of sunny weather, social. We've got all the calculus around test optional. Then we get to demographics. Talk us through what is happening with demographics, with the literal numbers of kids who will be applying this year, next year, compared to the most recent previous years, Jeff.
So we are headed to what is called in higher ed a demographic cliff. So the class of 2025, the high school graduating class of 2025 was the largest by far. It will be for as far as the eye can see. Essentially, you're getting now the students who were born 2007, 2008. My own kids are the class of 2028, 2030. They were born right after and during the Great Recession when people weren't having kids. And so you're going to see this huge fall off in the latter part of this decade. And then it never really recovers. It's low for most of the 2030s, and then it dips again because of COVID and when people weren't having kids during the pandemic. So higher ed has really never seen anything like this before. On top of that, the percentage of high school graduates going right on to college has dropped from 70% back in 2017 to closer to 60% now. So that's hundreds of thousands of students. I've calculated it. It's like in any given year, it's 5 Ohio State University campuses, basically now not going to college who would have been. So not only do you have this cliff, but now fewer high school graduates going on to college. So what does that mean? Everybody thinks, it's going to be really easy to get into the Ivy League or the Ivy Plus. At the margins, maybe their acceptance rates go up a little bit, but they're inundated with so many applications for so few spots. It's really not going to make a material difference at those institutions. Where it will make a difference is at other institutions where not only will it get easier to get in, but they're going to be desperate for students to fill seats. And that means money. And that means they're going to be, places that are really good are going to be sending you money to enroll. They're going to be giving you nice merit scholarships, nice discounts. And that's where I think if you're thinking about how does this impact you as a family, that's the game I'd be playing is, how good of a place could you get to? How much money can you get from them?
And what if you're thinking about the value proposition?
Well, in some ways, the value proposition is how much you put into it, right? We often talk about ROI, the return on investment.
Mhm.
We often think about the return. We don't think about the investment part of it.
Mhm.
And with private elite colleges now approaching close to $100,000 a year, let me repeat that, $100,000. I think I looked this up the other day. There's something like 15 or 16 colleges that are already over $90,000 a year.
Wow.
Parents are saying, okay, I'll pay for that at Harvard or Yale or Penn or, a selection of highly selective schools. But what I found in my reporting is that schools they used to pay full price for, the Kenyans of the world, for example, a lot of the liberal arts colleges, unfortunately, because I'm a big fan of the liberal arts, they are now saying, oh, I'm going to skip over those because I'm not going to pay 80 all in. And I'll go to the public university that gives me a good ROI. And what is that investment? First of all, the investment's lower. I might get a merit aid discount. I might get into the honors college. As many of the students I interviewed for the book, they ended up not only at an honors college, they got money for study abroad, they got money for undergraduate research. So even if the return is questionable, and when I say questionable, we're just in a period right now where AI is potentially eating a lot of entry level jobs for college students. So I think it's questionable at a lot of colleges right now because we just don't know where the job market's going. At least we're not over investing in this. And that allows us to save money. So our kids could go to graduate school, or maybe they could move to a city and take a job and we could support them. So I heard that so often from families that they didn't want to kind of essentially blow the budget on undergraduate because they wanted to pull some money back to do other things.
Yeah, I was struck, Jeff, in the book by the communication among families, between parents and kids, between spouses themselves about this calculus and the trade-offs, which, as people like to assume about teenagers and young people, oh, well, they're not capable of having these conversations. But these were complex, sophisticated conversations about big decisions. What struck you the most with the kids that you interviewed about the choices they ended up making? What were some of the themes that you saw that drove them to make maybe surprising or kind of less conventional choices?
Well, the surprising ones were among families who easily could afford, in some cases, easily can afford these big tuition prices. And those are the families, to be honest with you, that colleges and universities have banked on for a very long time. It's how the financial structure of colleges and universities have worked. Basically, get the people who can afford to pay full price, and then use that money to enroll middle and lower income students. Well, now those families are saying, okay, again, I'm willing to pay for a certain type of institution or a certain name of institution. But the calculus that was interesting to me, Vanessa, was the fact that students would say, you know what, this place is not worth 20 more thousand or 30 more thousand. That was an interesting calculus that students and families were making that I did not expect them to make, because 10 years ago, they would just say, yeah, sure, why not? And now they're not. And that is a big difference, particularly among higher income families who've always invested in higher education. And it really does change the financial sustainability, the financial structure of these institutions.
It's so fascinating. I've so many things going through my head, and I did as I was reading the book as well. But in the conversation, they've shifted a little. I mean, I'm thinking about kids of friends who are on indefinite gap years from college. They get there and they assess the value proposition when they're there. And they feel, and this is particularly true for kids in computer science and AI, they feel that maybe they can learn more out in the real world while earning some money and taking a gamble as opposed to paying into it. I mean, I think that the existential crisis that is coming to these universities, and I hope your next book is about graduate schools, because boy, there's a lot to unpack there, right? I mean, as a doctor, I will say medical education, this is another very confusing one about how much you pay and what
Well, and as you know, this summer, they've changed the federal law around how much money you could borrow for medical
Yes.
school as well, right? Which is also going to change, I think, the value calculation that families make on that.
Yes. And so it is interesting. Vanessa, I had the same response that you did as I was reading through stories of how kids and families were in conversation about these decisions. One of the things, Jeff, I think you do most artfully is you actually illustrate how kids are ready to have these conversations and how mature they are. Like sometimes I think we just don't give them credit for being this mature. Can we talk a little bit about federal policy and how that's impacted admissions? And maybe we can start with international students.
Big drop off this year in terms of the number of international students. We're still not exactly clear. We haven't seen all the full numbers yet from colleges and universities, but especially among master students, among graduate students. It used to be that undergraduates made up most of the international students in the US. After COVID, many more were from on the graduate side, but numbers are lower on both. I actually think it may be the bigger decrease might be next year, because if you think about it, international students start their search earlier than domestic students. So they started well before January 20th. And so they're now starting to see the impact of that. And if you're a college or university that particularly was not diversified in those international students, so India was very low this year because the visa line was just so long. And if you're heavily dependent on India and China, which are the two biggest intakes of international students at US universities, those institutions were really hurt. So that's a big place that institutions have to fill, colleges and universities have to fill. And we saw it during the summer. So a lot of colleges took students off their wait list, domestic students off their wait list, because they knew these students would not show up.
And how about, Jeff, when we think about, I don't even know how to refer to these anymore. I mean, what we used to call affirmative action, the federal threats to schools that have other DEI initiatives, this ED lawsuit that's
it's everything. I mean, there's just so much going on. I mean, so you had the big, beautiful bill over the summer, which changed a lot of, eliminated some student loan programs for parents, put caps on other programs, require institutions to have a little skin in the game if they have low returns on some of their programs. So that will, by the way, probably eliminate a lot of majors, especially in the arts at some colleges and universities. So you had that. You had all these investigations around admissions to make sure that they're complying with the 2023 Supreme Court decision that banned the use of race in college admissions. Then you had all these cutbacks on federal research dollars, both the overhead rates, that's like the dollars that colleges get to operate their research programs, and then the actual research dollars themselves. You had all of these negotiations that the Trump administration was having with the highly elite universities. I mean, we could go on and on. We could fill the rest of the podcast with what's been going on. But what worries me about any of these, not only just individually, but as a group, is that if I talk to a college president or vice president or anybody in the senior leadership, it's just every day it's something new that they have to learn about, and they're not really focused on the long game. And that's particularly true among the most selective, best known public and private universities. I will tell you that what's interesting is there's a interesting disconnect sometimes when I'm on campuses these days, especially, places that are a little bit off the beaten path, a little bit deeper in the rankings. Life is going on. It's not perfect. There's definitely some financial issues facing some of those colleges and universities. And obviously the bigger piece around student loans is going to impact them if it hasn't already. But there is this kind of interesting dynamic where a lot of the focus, both in the media and among the administration, has been on those top ranked elite schools that are in the media often. Everywhere else, where most American students go to college, it's almost been life as normal. So it's a weird disconnect when I'm on these campuses.
Okay, so we could spend forever on this, but I'm going to pop to the next topic because this is another one we could spend forever on. AI.
Oh.
I don't even know where to begin the question. I think the first question is, can you break down sort of how it's impacting admissions? I'm curious both on the part of sort of that, the essay being generated by AI and all that, but also how are applications being funneled through AI in order to sort them? Are they, I kind of want to see it from both sides.
What's interesting to me is that schools are experimenting with AI detection for essays. Some are trying to use AI for the transcripts. One of the most difficult, time consuming jobs in college admissions is making sense of transcripts from 25,000 different high schools in the US, all of which use different grading scales, all of which use different names for courses. It's incredibly time consuming. And in essence, it's the most important part of the application. And so you want to kind of get it right. And can you train these large language models on that? I know of some schools that are looking back at essays that students wrote a couple of years ago of students who were accepted and enrolled. And how are they doing now in college in freshman, sophomore year? And are there any clues that they would have gotten from their essay to know
that's interesting.
These students are succeeding and these students are not doing so well? Is there something that we could tell from their essays so that we could train future models at looking at the essay? Now, in essence, I do think the essay's in trouble. I'm not quite sure that given AI, the essay's been gamed for a long time. People have hired essay coaches. They've gotten a lot of coaching on the essay. And now with AI, I think there's a lot of skepticism in admissions offices about who is writing these things. How much help are they really getting? I'm going to make a bold prediction that the essay is going to be out the door. I don't know what will replace it, but I don't think it's going to be by the time my kids, 2028, definitely by 2030. I really do think the essay is either going to be really diminished or eliminated altogether.
Yeah. I mean, is there a world? I mean, my kids are going back to Blue Book exams, right? So is there a world where you are like, you show up on a site and write your essay, on the spot with a proctored?
Yeah, I think, by the way, the College Board would love that because they would probably be the ones proctoring it. I think there's a little bit of that. There's, a couple of colleges have been, especially these big elite universities, have experimented with video over the year, and these video platforms that allow a flexibility for students, but also basically they have one shot to do something. There's a prompt that they get. They have to answer it and then they kind of move on. And it's kind of in the moment and you get their thoughts in the moment. That may be something that replaces this. I think they want to get a better sense of grades. And again, maybe the transcript and how you train large language models on the transcript might make the transcript more valuable for institutions so that the essay becomes less valuable. I mean, to be honest with you, even when I was doing the last book, Who Gets in and Why, and I was embedded in 3 offices, the essay, they were speed reading through it. It really didn't help that much. In fact, I always thought it was odd how much time and effort and money we spend on the essay for how little it really impacted individual admissions decisions.
And yet the transcript is complicated because there is so much grade inflation at some institutions, some high schools, some colleges, and so it's a complicated piece as well. And the COVID of it all really threw a wrench in it. I think there's been some little bit more sort of back to baseline now.
Which is why we're going back to testing at some
Correct.
places, right?
I mean, my daughter was a junior. COVID started towards the end of her sophomore year in high school. She spent her entire junior year doing remote school like everyone else in LA. And the grading across the country that year for the juniors, and that was going to be the most important thing on their college admissions transcript, was incredibly inflated. Like, didn't matter if you were doing it in your bedroom or if you were doing it at school, because there was a lot of empathy for these kids. They were living through this thing that was just unprecedented. But then, I couldn't imagine what it would be to be a college admissions counselor who was looking at 50,000 transcripts that were all A's junior year, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that are complicated about this.
The whole application is, in some ways, I don't know where this is all going, but the application has all these signals that admissions officers are looking for, and the entire thing can be gamed in some way. We have grade inflation.
Right.
We have, essays, which we just talked about. We have test prep, which could get your numbers up in terms of your test scores. We have recommendation letters that, many teachers don't want to give an honest recommendation because they don't want to be accused later on of, keeping that student out. We have, just checklists of extracurricular activities to bolster that resume. So many admissions officers know they're not really getting an authentic look at a student, and that's unfortunate. Right. I'm not quite sure what can replace any of those things.
So given the rather dire and dark picture we painted here, let's spend a minute talking about community colleges and technical schools, right? The CEO of NVIDIA basically said something I've been telling my oldest kid for a couple of years, which is, I think you should start a plumbing or electrician company.
Well, AI won't replace that. That's for sure. At least not yet.
And I mean, this is a 23-year-old who's constantly, he has a job for now, but constantly scouring the lists of jobs that will not be replaced by AI, or, folks who are doing 2 years at community college, getting an associate's degree, and then transferring into some of these schools in state at, much better prices. So, Jeff, what are your predictions about the future of some of these post-high school decisions?
Well, we're seeing trade schools get more enrollment. And in fact, what you mentioned things like plumbing and electricians and things like that, but I went out to Idaho last year, and we went to the College of Western Idaho, which is one of their fastest growing 2-year colleges out there. It's in the shadow of Micron, one of the big microchip manufacturers. And they have a mechatronics program, which helps build these, sophisticated factory systems, not only for the Microns of the world, but for the Amazon factories and things like that. There's all of these programs, a lot of it hands-on, a lot of it, I think, perfect, especially for boys who are having a huge problem right now in higher ed, not only in terms of enrollment, but in terms of success in college and after college. And I think these programs are great. They lead to great jobs. They're not 4-year programs, but they could actually ramp up eventually to 4-year programs if you wanted to, but you will immediately get a job after 2 years. What was interesting, Cara and Vanessa, when I was in that program out in Idaho, again, these students are getting immediate jobs. But as I looked around the room, they were all mostly people, this was their second career. So 30s, 40s. And I asked around, I said, well, where are the 18-year-olds? Where are the 16-year-olds, right? Where are the students coming out of high school? And they're like, we can't get them interested.
That's fascinating.
And it's because, which is fascinating to me, I think a little bit of this is our culture in high schools where we just keep pushing the college narrative, even though, again, the videos I took at this place were just kind of cool. And if I were like a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, especially if I liked playing with Legos and working with my hands and getting them dirty, like these are like the types of things you would want to do. And again, we often talk about like welding and construction and plumbing and electricity, but there's all these other jobs that exist out there that you don't need a 4-year degree for. And I kind of wish we would talk more about them.
Do you think a little of it is also, it's not just the college narrative, but it's also that, over the past few decades, we have really shifted the shape of what the academic day looks like. Shop is gone, right? Yep. So the value that we used to place on hands-on learning has been replaced by, either less hands-on, more book-based learning, or shortening the day sometimes, right? Or athletics. I mean, it's not that these other things that have replaced it are bad. It's just that, frankly, I would have loved my kids to have been in a shop class and to have understood some basics about engineering and sort of their ability to get their hands dirty, which would have piqued their curiosity or their friends' curiosity and would have opened doors to some of these opportunities. And it doesn't feel like high schools are empowered to continue doing that in the same way.
Yeah, and I also think parents are to blame here. I think the reason why we talked earlier about public universities in other states and how they became so popular. But there was also a permission structure that was given as students started to go elsewhere to big publics out of state instead of privates, and especially the elite privates. Suddenly parents looked up of kids who were younger and said, oh, that person, Cara, you're sending your kid there. Or Vanessa, you're sending Jeff, you're sending your kid. Wow, there must be something to that, right? So parents really look to other parents for signals. And if parents start to not only send their kids to a broader range of colleges, but to a broader range of jobs and 2-year colleges and community colleges and technical colleges, that will start to give parents permission to think differently. There's so much of a permission structure I think we need to set up. So even if schools do it, it's going to fall on deaf ears unless the parents start to get involved.
Right. Which begs the question. I mean, sorry, but we're going to go there. How much does it even matter anymore? Like, how do we think about it? And is it worth it? Is it worth the financial pressure to get a degree? Is it worth the pressure these kids are experiencing earlier and earlier? I mean, now we're like into middle school, that middle schoolers are worrying about their grades and where they're going to go to college. Like, at what point do we say, I don't know if this is worth it, particularly with AI, particularly with opportunities and taking other pathways? What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, Vanessa, if you interviewed me 12 weeks ago before the book came out and before I was out on the road talking about it, I would have said, oh, I don't think it's really changing. And then I was amazed. I've done 6 weeks of events so far in 17 cities or so. So all over the country, I'm hearing from people, and these are middle income, upper middle income, affluent communities where parents are panicked, and they're starting to ask these questions in ways that I never really expected. And they're seeing things in their own families, in their friends' families, what you just mentioned, a kid who graduated in computer science, which, by the way, they were told guaranteed job. Now can't find work, working at Starbucks. They're seeing these students really struggle coming out of college, and they're starting to say, what are we doing this for? And to me, this is the movement I'm trying to create here, because it has to start somewhere, and it's not going to start with colleges. There's no financial incentive for them to change. It's not really going to start at the high schools because they really feed the colleges. So unless the colleges change, the high schools won't change. It's not going to start with the Common App or the College Board because they all, again, have financial incentives not to change. It's going to have to start with the parents. It's going to have to start as a collective action problem with the parents. It can't start just with me, the three of us here. It has to start where communities start to say, enough is enough. I'm so amazed at when I talk to parents at these events, and they'll come up to the microphone during the Q&A and they'll say, so Jeff, what else does my kid have to do to get into, fill in the blank, highly selective college?
Clearly they haven't read your book yet.
Well, or by the way, have been at the event for the previous hour. I sometimes wonder. I'm like, well, we just talked about taking the pressure off. Now you want me to add pressure to them. And I just say, well, what do they want to do? And they look at me with these blank stares and they're like, but what do we need to do? Or what do they need to do? And I'm like, you don't need to do anything. You need to do what you want to do in high school. I really feel like you've mentioned this going back to middle school. I just want to bring the joy back to high school. And with earlier and earlier deadlines, senior year, that means more of the search is moving into junior year, now starting to leak into sophomore year. And, at the most panicking high schools, well into freshman year. Like, let's bring back that joy of high school and that joy of discovery, because that's where students are going to discover what they want to do next. And if you just push that 4-year narrative from the freshman year on, they're never going to discover these things that I discovered out in Idaho, this incredible mechatronics laboratory that now filled with middle-aged people instead of filled with 18-year-olds.
Right. I mean, what do they want to do? It's an incredibly hard question for a 20-year-old to answer, let alone a 12-year-old to answer. They have no idea. Right, exactly.
I mean, when I think about my applications, I'm watching my daughter do her applications, and I'm like, I couldn't have answered any of these questions. Like, I didn't know what I was majoring in until 5 minutes before my major commitment was due sophomore year of college, let alone sophomore year of high school.
And what because you've had kids go through college, Vanessa, and Jeff, what but our listeners may not know, is the downward pressure to know what you want to do does not lift when you get to college. It triples, it quadruples. These kids think they have to know. And I totally agree with you that bringing the joy back is essential. And I think it is incumbent upon all of us to say, okay, how would we do that? Well, the first way we do it is we go back to the days when you could actually explore, where school was about figuring out what lights your fire. It doesn't mean that what lights your fire is what you're going to do for the next 50 years of your life, but at least, just start being authentic and figuring out what does bring you joy, because that's going to be a more successful path.
Instead of just trying to check things off.
Right. Yes. But it's funny. I mean, Jeff, I know you're close with with the amazing Mary Dell and Lisa Heffernan at Grown and Flown, and they put out a survey. What are parents of teens most worried about? What's keeping them up at night? Because I want to make sure I'm writing a book that's actually about what people want to read about. And the worry about job security in the future came so front of mind for people. It was one of the top responses, that and driving, which is pretty interesting. And what struck me was, to Cara's point, it's not just getting into college that is the pressure. It's the pressure to get the internship. It's the pressure to get the return offer.
Never
it's
ends.
the pressure.
Yep.
It never ends. And with a shrinking job market right now, and hopefully, I don't know, unrealistically, I hope that will change. You know, it's the exploration, Cara. It's like it even limits that exploration more. So all of that, again, I keep trying to move us away from the dark and dire, but I'm doing a terrible job of it. So Jeff, if you could imagine a world where movements of parents, where your book and our podcast and all these amazing people who can influence the thinking and behavior of parents and their kids, what would that world look like? You talk about the dream school, but I want to think about, what is the dream approach? What is the dream process that a family could go forth with that really speaks to who these kids are, who families are, what the world needs? What would that look like?
Well, that I think first we stop doing things for the college application process, that we feel like we have to do a couple of sports, 10 activities, take 15 AP courses or whatever it might be, and, save the world at the same time. So I think the first thing is that colleges, and this is again probably putting too much on colleges, but parents start saying, we're not doing that. We are just not doing it. And by the way, we're going to stop applying to some of these places. This is what it's going to take for colleges to pay attention, because they are just now inundated with applications. Second, I want parents and students to stop talking about college all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a 8th grade breakfast yesterday, or coffee, at my younger daughter's school. And it was about the transition into 9th grade. So we're only in the fall, by the way, of 8th grade. So we're starting to talk about the transition to high school. The questions at one point veered to college and college prep. And we're not even through 8th grade yet. We just started. And so like that whole craziness about thinking about it, talking about it, I would love to ban those Instagram pages where people announce where they're going to college. Like tell your family and friends, but why do you have to announce it to the whole world? So that's number 2. And then number 3, I would love every high school or every parent to require their kids to do 2 things. One is tour the colleges that you're least interested in first, or that are deeper in the rankings, not your reach schools. Tour the schools that are your kind of foundational safety schools first. Then compare those reach schools to those schools instead of the other way around. And require your kids to research schools that are not in the top 50. I want you to go and look at a couple of colleges and then come back to me and tell me what's great about these places that are beyond the top 50. Those are a couple of things that I think we could do immediately.
There's so much to talk about. The top 10, the top 50, the top whatever. Is there a movement afoot to reassess that assessment? Like, I know there are lots of mini categories about the best this school and the best that school, but if you really break it down, I mean, I'll give you, I've told this story before, so Vanessa has heard of it. When I was in medical school, I was at a program where one of the divisions in the hospital won the top division in the country, which was a big deal. And it really mattered in terms of their recruitment for trainees, except they had no faculty. All the faculty had quit the year that they won the best of. They had quit in the interim between the submission for the award and the actual giving of the award. So here this award is put out into the universe, and there's a big banner on the hospital. This division is the best in the country. And there literally wasn't anyone left to teach anyone. And it was such an incredible moment of realization that a lot of the ways in which we rank things are just simply bogus.
Oh, they are. And so I do a lot of student programs now, and I ask them about the U.S. News and World Report rankings. how much do they really know what goes into them? So the biggest factor in the overall rankings is a survey of college presidents and admissions officers, only a third of whom actually fill it out, and they fill it out in 5 minutes, and they really know nothing about these schools. So most students don't know that. But more than that, you were just talking about like these individual rankings. So you often see like best undergraduate teaching badges from the US News and World Report. Those are based entirely on the survey given to presidents and admissions officers. And those who I know fill it out have told me, well, how do I know what's happening at any of these other colleges or able to assess what's so great about their undergraduate teaching? So those are all bogus. In some ways, though, Cara, I understand why parents who are overwhelmed by this process, there are thousands of institutions out there. Even if we're just talking about 4-year institutions of some size, we're still talking about 12 to 1,400 colleges. How do you make sense of it? It's almost like you were talking about, medicine and doctors. It's like, how do you pick doctors, right? You go to the rankings often.
Most people call me.
Or
Jeff.
call you, right? Or you call your friends, which I do. But isn't that an odd way to like pick a doctor? Because my friend goes to them?
It's like, why would I prefer to go, and I do prefer to go to the teeny tiny little drugstore that is family owned in my neighborhood, as opposed to the gigantic CVS that has a much broader selection, because I want a curated selection so I don't have to stand in an aisle and stare at 5,000 things.
Well, and you also want a pharmacist who probably knows you. You want people who know you, right? Like, by the way, such an analogy with colleges.
Correct.
Like, we are picking. I was at a very highly selective high school last night here in DC. And I was just amazed at talking to some of the parents because they were talking about these great schools, all of which are in the top 25 in the US News and World Report rankings. And I said, many of those places are great because of their graduate programs, not because of their undergraduate programs. Go there for graduate school, go there to medical school, go there to law school, go there to get a PhD. But why are we so focused on some of these places that actually don't really care that much about undergraduate education? It's much like your neighborhood drugstore where they're curating the undergraduate education in a way that they'll care about my kids.
Okay, but let's now try to separate the chicken and the egg somehow. You've given a really compelling argument for why this has to start with parents. Why the incentives for every other piece of the pipeline do not point to them making changes. And so it's got to start with parents. But how do parents do that? What does that look like to be the first one or one of the first ones? And how do you look your kid in the eye and say, trust me, kiddo, this isn't great for you in the long run, so I'm going to stand my ground. Like, help a parent out.
No, and it's hard because if you get off that treadmill and no one else does, you look like the bad parent.
Right.
I see examples of this, right? We see a pushback against phones in schools, phones at home. We see pushback against social media in a way that I wouldn't have expected 5 years ago. Is there a comparison there where people are pushing back against these things that have been in our lives in a way? Right or wrong, I mean, we could debate the science on those things, but the same thing here. It just takes a community. It takes a school to take a stand. It takes a school, a community of parents in a school to say, we're not going to do this anymore. And that, I don't know exactly how that happens. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So if any of your listeners have an idea, please reach out, because this is the next step in what I want to do with this book. Because I see the moment is out there. I see people are lighting up. People are talking about it. Now we have to take that next step.
So Jeff, let's close with this question, which is, you've got people sitting here, right? Many of our listeners have kids who are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? They're not even in high school yet. And if they're listening to this podcast, they are trying to parent with thoughtfulness and deliberateness, and they're trying to hear what's happening in the world and make better, different choices for their kids, right? These are your people. These are your change makers. Instead of thinking about what they're saying no to, rather, if we could think about it in a proactive way, in a values-based way, what are they saying yes to, right? What is the path informed by? What are the cobblestones that sort of build the foundation for this journey? What are some of the things people can be thinking about that pushes back, not in a no, we're not doing it, but in a yes, this is how our family is choosing to approach it?
Well, first of all, they're saying yes to more free time rather than carting their kids around to every activity, every sport. And I see that starting to happen, and I hope it does continue, because really a lot of that has been to furnish the resume for college at some point. Second, they're saying yes to thinking more broadly about how we think about prestige, not only in K through 12, but in higher ed. And this theory comes from Stu Schmiel, who's the dean of admissions at MIT, who told me that he's actually very hopeful about millennial parents because they went to a broader range of institutions, including, by the way, we talked earlier, they were at the forefront of the big public universities. So a lot of very smart kids didn't go to the highly elite colleges. They're now parents. And, they're on the early side of the millennials now they're sending their kids to college, or they are they're in elementary school and middle school. And so we are starting to see this as I even talk to younger parents who are not yet in high school. I just hope they're able to carve that out and that there's not a switch that flips as they get to high school and they have to follow what the previous parents did. So I think that's what gives me hope in what they're saying yes to.
Love that.
I don't know if we're leaving listeners feeling hopeful, but I think certainly really interesting, complex, nuanced insights, Jeff. And the book has even more. Some of the history of how we've gotten to where we are is really, really, really fascinating. And I just so appreciate the thoughtfulness with which you are approaching such a massive, complicated institution, national mega institution. And, I want to just close by saying, we don't sit here as if we ourselves have all the answers. We have been as much a part of the problem as we have been inclined to be part of the solution. So anyone listening who feels like, oh my God, I'm doing it wrong, or I've messed it up. Yes, so have we. We have all bought in, and we have also all rethought it. So I hope this conversation with Jeff is an opportunity for folks to just think a little bit differently and to reevaluate the values and the priorities in their own families as you go forward.
Yeah, and Vanessa, if I could just quickly add, in the long race between education and technology, education has always won. We're in a very messy period that we're living through right now. And I think there is a little bit of doom and gloom as a result. But if you look through the long arc of history where technology has taken over jobs previously, education has always kind of gotten us out of it. And so I do want parents to think, whatever that education is, it could be a 2-year technical education, it could be a 4-year degree, it could be graduate education. Over the long run, it's still a great investment. I think right now in the moment, it feels very uncertain, very messy. And I don't want us to lose the track of that longer arc of history.
Education survived the invention of the television.
Yeah. And the internet. And now I think it will, and I think it will do the same for AI. I really do.
Thank you for coming on, Jeff. It's fascinating.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.